Hey everyone, in this video you'll see a time-lapse of how to make renders like this with SketchUp and V-Ray. So let's get started. We're going to start with a plan from AutoCAD, but for your own projects this isn't totally necessary. I'm using it here to accurately model the apartment's walls, windows and doors, but you can start however you want to. First thing we're doing is just moving everything to layer 0. Then we're going to purge the drawing and do a save as. Now file import the DWG into SketchUp. Perfect. Check dimensions are good. Get rid of Chris. Bring in the elves as well. And then we can just line it up with a point in the room. Here I'm using the corner. Now draw your floors. Group the floors. Now we're doing the walls. And then bring up the walls using your elevation or using the ceiling height to get the correct height. Now we make our window and door openings. Then you'll see these two are actually fireplaces. The fireplaces aren't working for this project, but it's always a nice accurate historic detail to put in. That's our rear window. That's the fireplace hearth. Now we're going to block out the fireplace very quickly. We're using a component, and what we can do is draw one half of it and then mirror it as a component, so we have two instances, symmetrical, that will update as we add details. The fireplace is blocked out. So now let's move on to this front window. I'm going to add in some of the details now, but later on we can add in smaller things for the render. So I'm going to mass out the window that we have, so it's double French door. Quite traditional, with a transom for a top light. Now let's add in the internal doors. We have one in the kitchen and one into the living room. And let's do the moldings. So if you're not familiar with SketchUp's Follow Me, it's great for doing architectural profiles such as this. You just draw it in section once, and then you can extrude it all the way around your model. Super easy. Follow me, some more follow me. You can see how quick it is to do things such as the cornice or crown molding, the base and the pictorial. It's things like that which add detail to the render and make it look super realistic. So now let's do the trim around the French window. And we're using the same profile for the large opening between the kitchen and the living room. So we can just copy that profile that we made and stretch it out. Now the door trim for the internal doors. I'm going to do quite a simple traditional molding for this. In this project we haven't actually decided on the exact profile it will be, so we can show something that's just a representation for now. And let's add in the door leaf. And make our opening for the rear window. Now for the kitchen, it's always quite a complicated challenge. So I always try to model the kitchen in a separate file and then add it in as a component. The reason I do this is because when we start the model, we have one design for the kitchen, but it usually changes based on client feedback. So I start by massing it out. We normally get some feedback, whether that sort of kitchen will work in the project. And then once we have a layout confirmed, we then add in details such as the finish, the exact cabinets, the wall cabinets, the appliances, and where things like sinks, dishwasher, extractor fan will go. And so this I'm calling kitchen option 1, putting it on a layer in SketchUp because we might have an option 2 as well, as you can see. So we'll leave the kitchen like that for now until we have a decision, and we'll come back to that later. Now I'm just going to quickly model the ceilings as one surface. And group them. Now I'm going to bring in an RCP which we have for this project, and that's because this project has a lot of recessed downlights in the ceiling. We've tried to make them as discrete as possible, but it's always worth showing them in the render, otherwise the client might think they're getting a blank ceiling. And of course we only have one specified downlight, so let's make it a component, and then I'm going to copy it across to each of the downlight locations. Fortunately there was a lot of symmetry in this project, which means it was very easy to lay out these downlights. Okay, moving on to door. We're going to add some more detail to the door. So this is quite a traditional door profile that we're going to go for, something quite Victorian. So it's a 3-panel door with a mid panel. And we're going to do a nice simple beading to give it some detail. And as you can see, if you don't know the exact profile that you're using, you can use something just approximate that looks correct until there is something nailed down. And then take your profile and stretch it to the other 2 panels. It saves you time. I also try to add in light switches when we know where the locations will be. It just helps to be one of those small details that adds some realism to a render. And if you don't know the plugin Fredo Corner, I highly recommend you download it for SketchUp. Okay, now paste in the component. And always check your switch heights are actually accurate and they're also up to building code for your area. Okay, back to the kitchen. So let's say we are going with this straight run of kitchen. We're going to have some wall units, some appliances, and then keep it all on that north elevation. So now let's add in some more detail to these cabinets. So I started with the wall cabinets, the 2 on the left, and we're going to add some base cabinets which are 900 high. Now the design for this project's kitchen is quite contemporary. It's going to be a stainless steel finish, so there's going to be a lot of very clean edges. However, if you have a more traditional kitchen, add profiles, moldings, all of the details. So now let's just make an opening for the cooktop, and then we'll do the same for the sink. If you don't know the specifications for such appliances or plumbing fixtures, just do something arbitrary that is correct or is standard for this type of kitchen that you're working with. Now let's do the handles. We only have one type of handle for this kitchen, so it's super simple. I've made it a component, used Philip along, so when we have double sets of cabinets, they'll be symmetrical. And let's add one here. And then the same for the final wall unit. Now this is going to be an integrated fridge freezer. Imagine something like a Sub-Zero. So the handle for this is very large, very long, as you can see. However, it follows the same design principles. So now let's bring in our kitchen component, get it into place. Okay, let's do the furniture. So I'm using components from our furniture supplier. Fortunately, they do give away free downloads. Obviously, depending on the project, you may know what supplier you're using. Maybe a mixture, or if you're using antiques, you can use something approximate. The key is to use efficient models that are accurate for the type of furniture which is being used.
Any ideas?
And we have our coffee table and our recliner. Now I know this is a very interesting component that has some errors with it, so I'm going to redraw the glass tabletop myself so I know that it works, that it's efficient, and it's not going to slow down our renders. Okay, now dining. Let's do the dining table. Unfortunately, it is an antique, so there's no model, so I've quickly masked it out in SketchUp, adding in some details, and then the chairs will be a standard chair from a supplier. Great, so table is in. Now art is a big part of many of such projects, so I'm going to quickly mask out some wall art frames. I know we have some photography and some drawings that we're going into this project, so let's start with this composition, which will be behind the recliner. And then we have our big piece of wall art to the left of the fireplace. And the great thing about doing it in SketchUp is you can start to appreciate the art for this project in 3D. You can move it around and see what works, what doesn't, what the views will look like, which is really important when you're using especially valuable artworks that the client really loves. Now let's do the sideboard. It's always good for renders to add a small gap where you have doors, say 2 or 3 millimeters or 1/8 of an inch. Then in the renders you can really see it doesn't look like one solid surface. It will actually look like 4 cabinet doors. And another piece of art. And let's add curtains. I'm using these from a 3D Warehouse download. You just have curtains on the one side, so let's delete those. Bring it into place. And our final piece of wall art for the living room. This is going to be a really cool photograph. Right, let's add in accessories. So we can do, starting with a table lamp, a floor lamp, and I'm just going to model out some books now. I'm sure you've seen in many photographs of interiors, they always have art books. And copy them over to the coffee table. Try to style it as if you were styling your own coffee table, and think about what you would arrange where, what you would include, and how you would edit it. Now let's add in some cushions. These are from 3D Warehouse, so it's always quicker. However, you do need to pay attention to the size once you import them. Now for this project, we're using 2 task floor lamps, which are very specific from a supplier. They're very similar to what you might see from Circa Lighting or Restoration Hardware's task lamps. They're floor standing, but they have this really cool, almost pharmacy-like lamp head. So I'm going to model those now very quickly, and I think it's really important because they are quite a distinctive part of the FFE for this project. One tip when I have for modeling these types of pieces of furniture or lighting is always check the spec sheet. Check once you finish the model that it is actually the correct dimensions, otherwise you might end up with something totally wrong or inaccurate. So those are done. Now I'm going to create a wooden pedestal for our sculpture. Now this client loves traveling, so he has a huge model airplane collection, and we thought that'd be quite cool to include in this project. So we're going to mount a scale model of the Concorde on this pedestal later on, as you'll see. Let's do the floor lamp. And let's add in a smaller photo frame. And again, it's just like styling in real life. See what looks good, move things around, and don't be too timid. Now let's see what views look good for the render. And that's a good one. We can get another one of the kitchen and the living room together. Always think about composition as well. Now let's start adding materials for the V-Ray renders. So floorboards, most important. I always try to check that the scale of the floorboards is correct. You don't want floorboards that look too narrow or too wide, because it totally the render will look wrong straight away. I'm just going to change it based on a sample we have. We have this quite dark hardwood flooring. That looks good. 120 for the width. Great. Now let's do the marble backsplash and countertop for the kitchen and for the fireplace. This is a Carrara white marble that we're using. We fortunately had photos from the stone supplier, which was really great because then in the render we can show something which is very close to reality. Now let's do the stainless steel texture for the kitchen. And our handles will be a slightly different stainless steel. They won't be brushed, they'll be polished. So it's really good to include details like that. And as you can see, I've just tried to tweak the brass finish so it looks correct for our floor lamps and our table lamps. And now this coffee table from Minotti has an aluminium or powder coated metal base with a glass top, so let's add in those two materials. We have our veneer wood for the sideboard, another dark timber. Now let's do the sofa textile. And now of course we have the sofa legs, which are a polished metal. And same for the recliner. The recliner itself is a tan leather, so let's go ahead and apply that. Now the fabric looks a bit too dark, so I'm lightening it in Photoshop. We'll change it. Now let's do the art. So I've already got JPEG saved with all the different works of art for this project in a folder, which makes it super simple to import, to scale correctly, finish off. With a family portrait going in here. Trim back, trim a bit more to get the frame detail. Okay, now I'm going to do this cowhide rug. Now, I have a JPEG of what it looks like from the supplier, but I need to trace around it to get the shape of the hide. So we'll do that very quickly. We'll mirror it, so we have both sides, and then I'll just trim it where it's asymmetric. And by doing this, when we drop it into the render, there won't be a white background where there is no rug. Rotate it. Scale so it's correct. Make it a bit thinner because 5 to 10 millimeters is probably fine. And let's bring in our great photograph of Christy Brinkley. Make sure it's the right way. And get it to the correct size. Now I'm going to add some of the books. So there's a few key books which really add detail to the render. However, you don't have to do every single book and add spine covers to them because you'll never see them in the render. Okay, so now let's add in that scale model of the Concorde that I said about. Just get it the right size and then position it on the pedestal so it looks correct. And now let's add the finish to the pedestal itself. Now let's add a fabric for the curtains. V-Ray for SketchUp does come with preset materials. One of those is really good for curtains. However, you can of course use your own V-Ray materials. And as I'm doing this, I always have the fabric samples next to me so I can compare on screen versus the real sample to check that it looks accurate. And of course check the scale as well. You don't want a fabric which is a 3 meter pattern when in fact it's only a 1 meter pattern. Now we have this small balcony outside the French doors, and it's a really typical detail for these London properties to have these stone balusters. So I'm going to quickly model one of them and then make it a component and then copy it across. That looks correct. And again, we only need to model one side of the balcony because it's symmetrical. We'll make it a component, flip along the axes, and then should be good. Now let's just apply materials to our floor lamp. And I always like to hang the art at a slight angle, because in reality no piece of art ever hangs perfectly straight off the wall. And our frame, which is a white plastic frame, so let's do that. Now let's add some hinges to the doors quickly. It's one of those small details that you'll see and pick up in the render very subtly, but really adds an extra level of detail. And now we need to add a background for the render that you will see out of the French doors. So we have a street view. As you can see, it's a very nice neighborhood, lots of foliage and trees, white stucco buildings. So it's really great to add that in to the render. And these are our window pane profiles. Much like the door trim or the door profiles, if you don't know the exact spec, just draw something arbitrary which looks correct for the render. And there we go. I'm just going to tweak the balusters slightly. That looks better. And add some detail to the handrail at the top. Again, check things like handrail heights. Depth of the balcony is realistic, it meets code. Okay, now let's set up the render in V-Ray. So I'm in V-Ray Asset Editor. I'm going to start by doing a quick setup and checking the view looks good angle. We'll check the exposure. This is our good draft render. And as you can see, we have a good lighting. And let's re-render it. We have a much higher quality render. Now I'm going to tweak it in the V-Ray settings. Add some bloom and glare. And we're there. Now I did these final renders at 5000 by 5000 pixels, which it might be overkill for what you're using it for. However, what it does mean is you can always zoom in, crop your images and bring out details that you wouldn't be able to if you did it at a lower resolution render. Now if you do want this step-by-step guide, go on interiors-defined.com and there's the whole guide there. Thanks so much for watching.